And of course, at the beginning, she does hope that they will eventually go back to Russia, that this is just a sort of blip.
Yes.
And that somehow the British will defeat the revolutionaries.
Welcome to another episode of Beneath the Page, a podcast about books and the writers behind them. I'm Steve Couch.
I'm Sophie Beal.
And we're joined today by Janet Hancock, who is a friend of ours from the Bournemouth Writing Festival, and she's the author of 2 historical fiction novels. So welcome, Janet. It's lovely to have you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Sophie. Lovely to be here.
Yes. And we've actually seen each other very recently at the Bournemouth Writing Festival. There are networking events that go on all the way through the year, but the actual festival happens in April. But you two were both at the Author Marketplace, weren't you?
We were, yes. It was very busy, particularly in the afternoon, and
Yes.
some really good conversation.
Yeah, so Sophie graciously was selling other people's books, and Janet was selling books by other authors from Resolute Press, as well as her own. And I was just selling my own books. It's all about me.
So let's get on with our expose-style interview. How did you start writing, Janet?
Well, it was something I was always going to do in my 20s and 30s. I devoured books by writers of the time, Catherine Gavin, Catherine Gaskin, Anne Bridge. They were set in Central Europe mainly, around the time of the end of the First World War, after the First World War. And I used to think, this is wonderful. I can do that. I'm going to write a novel. I'm going to be a writer. And I was working full time and the rest of life took over.
Yeah.
But eventually I started with short stories, which is a good thing to start with.
Both of your novels are set in against the backdrop of the Russian Revolution. What was it about that moment in history that drew you back to it?
I just find it fascinating. History is my first love, and particularly the early 20th century. And the Russian history in particular, it's such a sad history, and I just found it fascinating.
Can you tell us what The West in Her Eyes is about?
It's a fictional Russian family who in 2 generations made fabulous wealth from oil down the Caspian Sea area, centred around Baku. Baku gets a moment sometimes in the national news when it hosts COP29 talks or football matches or motor racing. And oil is still very important, though the economy is built on oil. But 100 years ago, it was a very new business. People flocked there from all over Russia, and some made their fortunes, but a lot didn't. This family did, and of course, at the time of the revolution, it was all taken away from them. They would have had to have left anyway, but they left before they were pushed, so to speak. They had a chance to leave, so they took it, with just what they could carry in a bundle. And I thought, well, if they're right in the south, near the Caucasus, not far from present-day Iran, which way are they going to go? And I love maps, and I love journeys, so I just had the map out on the floor of my study and worked out which way they went and what happened to them. And the book is set over a 9-year period, and they end up in France, but a lot happens before that.
Very much so. I had Google Maps following them as I was reading.
The idea of exile runs through the book, and part 1 starts with a Nabokov quote, "In exile, one lives by genius alone," which really struck me. Why did you choose that as the reader's first encounter with the book?
I think it's quite true. They had to learn how to cope. Esther, one of the main characters, has never dealt with money or needed to bother about money, and here she is having to learn how to live hand to mouth. They just have to learn new skills.
She is very, as you say, very naive when we first meet her, in lots of ways.
Yes. She's very resistant, isn't she? Even to getting a job.
Yes. Well, she's never had to. She's never had to worry about that sort of thing. And of course, at the beginning, she does hope that they will eventually go back to Russia, that this is just a sort of blip.
Yes.
And that somehow the British will defeat the revolutionaries and they'll be able to go back, and life will go back to how it was before, which of course didn't happen.
You've been a teacher, haven't you? And I was wondering if you could possibly explain the very complicated politics that was going on around the fall of the Ottoman Empire. If you can't, that'll make me feel better for not understanding it.
Right, the Ottoman Empire was this huge, most of the Balkans, present-day Turkey, which was then Anatolia, all what today we call the Holy Land, Palestine, Egypt, North Africa. So this huge, unwieldy empire. But by the end of the 19th century, it was starting to fragment. And after the First World War, new countries were formed: Yugoslavia, Macedonia, present-day Turkey, and they wanted their independence. Turkey, the Ottoman Empire, was on the losing side of the First World War, so the thing just crumpled.
Now, it seemed that Esther, she's probably the biggest character in the book, isn't she? She's very driven by ambition, and her story seems to be ambition versus love. Would you agree with that? I think it's a tension all creatives can relate to. I was so tired after the festival, for instance. I couldn't drive my children to school. But how do you feel about this? How do you feel about the tension between ambition and love yourself?
I think it's still very much a contemporary problem, particularly for women who are having to juggle something they really want to do, whether it's creative or whether it's business, juggling that with family life, childcare, caring for elderly parents. It's something that's always there, and each individual has to decide herself what she's going to do. It's not an easy thing.
No, I think that's it, isn't it? I think that's very wise, actually. You're saying it's a decision where to draw the line, rather than there's one right or one wrong answer.
One of the things throughout the book that Esther is struggling with, for her, the ambition side of that coin is her music. I was really interested in the musical side of the book. What does music represent to Esther?
It's the piano. She was 8 years old when she started to learn the piano, and her father had took her and her twin brother to Paris. There was a piano where they were staying, and she'd never come across one before.
That's a lovely moment in the book.
Yes,
that was one of my favourite bits.
Yes, and she felt it was like a conversation.
Yes.
She'd got to start the conversation, she got to play, and she could then get this music from these ivory and black notes. And it's just part of her. She does have periods of time when she has no access to a piano, so she then uses a dead keyboard, whether it's the side of the boat or the tabletop, and she can hear it in her head. She has a couple of occasions when she has access to a piano and it's untuned, which she hates, but when she has access to a well-tuned piano, she can just play for hours.
And there were certain pieces that she plays that recur in the throughout the book. I mean, my first book is very much steeped in a very different kind of music, and I know I was very careful in choosing what songs were referenced. Could you talk a little about that process, how you chose her repertoire?
Yes, it's classical music. The Chopin's Revolutionary Study. I did learn the piano as a child and a young woman, but I haven't played for years and years and years. But nevertheless, that was part of my growing up, that particular piece, because the son of a family friend did play it, and hearing it, it's always stayed with me. I found a few shots on YouTube of a Russian pianist playing it. It was wonderful to have that on when I was doing those passages. The other one is Schumann's Fantasie, which he wrote when he believed he had lost Clara, that he would never be able to marry the love of his life, and that features in the book.
Yes.
That was something I heard in the early days of the book, and I thought, yes, I'm going to use this. And then the slow movement of Beethoven's Third Piano Concerto, which has always been a favourite of mine.
I'd missed that about the Schumann. I'd missed that.
We've asked about Esther's relationship with music. Could you tell us about your relationship?
Well, yes, I was put to the piano at the age of 8, and I played for 10 years. I had lessons every week and learned to read music, of course. But then when I went to train as a teacher, music wasn't my main subject, so I didn't have to practice, which I would have had to do had I done music as a main subject. So I did other things. I started singing more, which I've done ever since, all my life, and the piano just sort of fell into the background, and I haven't played for a long time. I think my fingers would be too stiff now to play.
But the music itself.
So it's always been part of my life, and I'm glad I had the grounding I did
Yes.
have as a child.
The centrality of music for Esther, how much of that is from you? And how much of that is you going further with the character?
If I say 50-50, maybe 60-40
Okay.
with character, because I was not driven in the way that Esther is, and I never had ambition to play on the puppet.
And she's an exceptional talent, which I've never heard you play, so
No.
I'm making no judgment on your playing. But she's an exceptional talent.
Yes.
Yeah.
The West in Her Eyes is a book full of displaced people, exiled from the countries that they love. You seem to have an awful lot of empathy for this. Does it come from anywhere in particular?
It doesn't come from my personal experience, no. Thank you for saying that, yes. As I was editing the book, I thought very little has changed in 100 years. We still have people for different reasons and going to different places, but people losing everything they had and going to another country where they're always the outsider.
And I think something that struck me was, and some of the people they encounter are extraordinarily kind and generous, and some of the people are very abrupt and dismissive. And again, as you say, it feels like nothing has changed in that regard.
Yes, human nature doesn't change.
Yeah.
No.
At one point in the book, Esther specifically compares herself to the biblical Esther, who, as she points out, was another Jewish exile in Persia. Was her name chosen deliberately because of that? And are there any other parallels between the two Esthers?
Sometimes when you're starting to create a book, and for me it's the characters that come, and they sort of reach out to you. Esther's family came to me fully formed.
Yes.
With the brother who becomes a Bolshevik, and the whole family, and they came to me fully formed with their names. But then as I was working on the book in successive drafts, I realised that there was also the biblical Esther, who was a Jewess and was far from home.
Your Esther is very motivated to preserve her people's heritage. So not quite the same, but there was an overlap, I thought.
I think the Esther in the book is a very determined woman, and more so the older she gets. As we've already said, she was very naive. Understandably so. At the beginning she'd had a sheltered upbringing, but she becomes very determined, very focused. And I think the Esther in the Bible the same. She was a very brave woman.
Yes. I think another thing that struck me on the subject of names, it seemed to me that names have quite an important symbolic role in the book, because both Esther and Anahid fight to retain their identity and to not allow their real names and identities to be stripped away from them. And they are mostly sympathetic characters, whereas Lev, Esther's brother, enthusiastically embraces the chance to cast off his identity and takes the new name of Leon. And as he develops, I don't want to plot spoil if people have not read it, but he's not such a sympathetic character.
I think in today's parlance we would say he had been brutalised.
Yes.
He believed passionately in what he was doing, what was happening, but no, he was not sympathetic.
And some of his actions are the result of that brutalisation and are brutal themselves.
Yeah.
I did feel when the book was first published it should come with a government health warning. There are passages in the book that some readers may find distressing.
Yes, trigger warnings.
They were not easy to
No,
write.
no. So something I noticed, and it was slightly reminiscent of Dr. Zhivago, was where Lev, there are no private thoughts, no private memories, and he has to share everything. That was very, very striking, very dehumanising.
And that is how it was,
Yes.
So we've talked about The West in Her Eyes, which Sophie and I both read very quickly in order to be prepared for this and thoroughly enjoyed. What we haven't read is your first book, Beyond the Samovar. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Yes, it's quite different from this second one. I had in mind I wanted to write a novel. I was doing short stories, learning my craft, going to writers' days and weekends and just soaking up everything I could. I wanted to write a novel. I wanted the big canvas.
Yes.
But I didn't know what I was going to do. I would say to anybody who's writing or thinking about writing, if you find a little quote that's interesting, make a note of where and when you found it, because I didn't do this. But I read a little fragment in a newspaper about a young English woman who went to Russia as a governess with a wealthy Russian family. And at the turn of the 19th, 20th century, a lot of young English women did this. Russian families liked young English women as governesses and nannies because they imposed order and a structured day and a walk in the morning and lunch in the nursery and then a little rest. And of course this was not the Russian temperament at all. They liked English imposing some order. So this young Englishwoman went to Russia, was working as a governess, and at the time of the and she was in Baku. This was the other thing. I'd never heard of Baku. I mean, as I've already said, I love maps, so I reached for the atlas. This was pre-Google days.
Yes. Oh,
where's
I just
Baku?
about remember then.
Where's Baku? So I find it all right down in the south, not far from what was then Persia, on the coast of the Caspian Sea. How did she get all the way down there? And immediately these questions started. Who was she? How did she get all the way down there to Baku, rather than stay in the capital? And when the revolution came, was she able to stay in Baku? If not, what did she do? Which way did she go if she was going to escape? And all these questions just started forming and wouldn't go away.
Yes.
So that was the start of the book. So this unnamed Englishwoman that I'd read about, I was going to fictionalise her. She became Livy. So she meets Peter, who's an oil engineer, and they marry and they have a baby, George. And at the start of my first novel, Peter has decided, without discussing it with her, or at least knowing that she doesn't want to leave, Peter has decided they are going to leave, and that the best way to go, she has an aversion to travelling by sea, she gets very seasick. So they're going to go by land. They're going to trek across the north of Russia with a 5-month-old baby, and they will get to Archangel on the north coast, 2,000 miles from Baku, and they will get a ship back to England, and they will go to his family, and everything will be wonderful. So the first part of the book is their journey. I don't want to give any more away, but out of the three of them, Livy, Peter and the baby, only 2 of them actually do make it to England. And the second half of the book is how they readjust to life or adjust to life in England.
And when did the first one come out?
That was published in 2019 by the Conrad Press, independent publisher.
And the West in Her Eyes is published
by Resolute Books.
Can you tell us a bit about Resolute Books?
Yes, Resolute Books was founded 2 years ago. It is we're an independent, a lot of C words, a cooperative, a collective. It's a collective of writers, editors and graphic designers. There are 17 of us now, and we live all over the UK. It's not area specific, and the whole ethos behind Resolute Books is that there are a lot of good books being written, a lot of manuscripts that need to be got out to the reading public. And so Resolute Books publishes across a whole range of genres, as historical fiction, crime fiction, fantasy, young adult dystopia, memoir, poetry. We don't want to be known for just one particular genre, but what we do want to be known for is a good standard of writing. So there are quite a few checks that a writer who applies to join will go through. Then a book will also go through various checks and reads before it's given the thumbs up for publication. So I joined last year. I came in at number 13, and now we seem to have settled at 17, which is a manageable number. Because we are UK-wide, we have a Zoom every month to discuss anything that needs discussing. At the beginning of April, we had our first face-to-face away day, which was really nice because meeting...
So you saw how tall people were?
Well, yes, Zoom does not give any indication of height or breadth. Or otherwise. No, it was lovely. I had met, I think, a couple of people previously face-to-face, but it was very nice to meet other.
I just love the idea. Yes, but it really sorts out so many of the problems of traditional publishing.
It sounds like a much more of a community and more actively supportive than a traditional author publisher.
Yes, every writer is responsible for their own book, but you're not on your own. You can shout for help, and there are other people perhaps more experienced than you are in whatever it is you're wanting help with. So we work to our strengths, we support each other, which is good, because you do need that support.
I loved the idea. When I heard about it, I wished I'd thought of it first. So what are you writing at the moment?
So yes, I am working on a third novel, which again stands separately from the other two. There is a tenuous Russian connection. It all takes place almost exclusively in England, so it's less exotic than The West in Her Eyes. There's a little bit during the Spanish Civil War, and there is a little bit in Eastern Europe, but not much. It's set over a much longer time span, 1924 to 1939, so 15 years. It was a period of great change, those years after the First World War, particularly social change and particularly for women. So there are different attitudes in the book: resisting change, embracing change, bring it all on. They were the years when anything went, anything could happen. Forcing change as well. So I have three narrators. The working title is The Stepmother, quite simply because I haven't come up with anything more original.
Did you think of the first two titles yourself?
Yes, I did. The West in Her Eyes, it's always been that. I submitted it Beyond the Samovar. The Conrad Press asked if I would change it. The editor wanted something that reflected the Russian heart, the emotional heart of the novel. So I had about 48 hours in which to come back with something.
No, I haven't been able to think of a good title in 18 years.
I came up with that. I suppose I make assumptions I shouldn't make. It's amazing the number of people who don't know what a samovar is. It's basically an urn for boiling water.
Well, I'm afraid I assumed it was a place. I didn't know until now. Literally, you're telling me.
There are regional variations in the scrolling and the decoration of it, but basically it's an urn for boiling water. I wanted life beyond the samovar, beyond the Russianness, because of course that is what happens when the two who survive the journey get back to England. They have to live life beyond the Russianness. So that's how it came about.
Where can people find your books if they want to read them, which they frankly should?
Yes.
Where can they get them?
Thank you. Well, any bookshop will get either of the books for you. It can also be bought online, waterstones.com, whsmiths.com, Amazon. It's also available as an e-book.
And the rest of the Resolute books are on, including yours, are on their site, aren't
they? Yes, resolutebooks.co.uk, and all the members, if you go to the author page, you'll see our mugshots.
Brilliant.
Lovely.
Well, thank you so much, Janet. It's been lovely chatting to you.
It's been lovely talking to you. Thank you for asking me.
Well, thank you for coming in. It's been brilliant.
Please write that next book, because we'd like to have you back again.
It can't be rushed. I can't rush these things, but it's taking shape. It's emerging from the undergrowth.
That's brilliant.
Well, wasn't that a fun interview, Sophie?
Wasn't it? I am so relieved that went well, especially as we both had to read it in the last 48 hours, was it?
I think less than that. It started reading it on Sunday night, and we recorded the interview on the Tuesday morning, and most of Monday I spent reading the book.
Pretty much me too. But it was such a good book. I'm so glad.
Yeah, it's not a short book. I don't think I'd have been able to stick with reading it in the time I had if it wasn't such a good book.
Yeah, it was epic in the best sense. I didn't just get a really good love story, but there was history in it, and there was certainly geography I didn't know. I'm really glad we were made to read it.
I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I loved the musical angle in it.
Yes.
Although Janet's taste in music and mine are very different, I really got the feel for someone who loved music and who understood the place that music can have in someone's life.
Yeah, because it was a worry for me that you would get boring if your music tastes overlapped in any way.
Although, to be fair, you always worry that I'm going to get boring.
Right. I thought I'd hidden it better.
Moving on before Sophie insults me anymore. If you don't, like Sophie, think that I get too boring and you're enjoying the podcast, then please do remember to click like and subscribe, and to leave reviews on whatever platform you're listening on. It really does make a difference in algorithms and helping other people to discover the podcast. And also tell your friends.
And remember, we have a new episode every 2 weeks.
So until the next time, thank you for listening to us, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.